Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Geez, I didn't know there was that many people here. Nistuan nagok sokyawa ga saki. Nitdo ganai. Nam ninna anista nipomaki. Nixist anista abuyaki. And these are all my friends here. My relations are all, we were just talking about relations and how we're all connected. And so I'm always glad to have one more to the fold. So when I get to chatting with some other people in the room, somehow we find we're connected. And it's always good to see old friends that have moved away or married away. And one of my childhood friends was Delphine and Pipestem, and she's moved away, and so we reminisce every time we see each other. So anyway, welcome. I'm going to be talking about our sacred bundle, the children on the reserve in Indian country. And all the presentations I listened to were wonderful. I think they, I can't stop learning about our ways, your ways, some ways, everything is good. And so you put it in your bundle, because down the road, some kid is going to come around and ask for some questions wanting answers to something. And everything I learned from my teacher for 25 years, I've done. Margaret Heinemann, she passed away, and before she passed away, she wanted a shell dress. She was in the hospital, and I said, I'll get you a shell dress, I'll get you a shell dress. I ran down to Browning, and I have a friend there that makes outfits, and I said, could you make up an outfit for Margaret? She's in her 90s, and she's requesting a shell dress, okay, and I didn't give her the instructions, I left. Went back to the hospital, I said, your shell dress is being made. Oh, good, So a few days later, I went back to get it and brought it to the hospital. And she looked at it and she saw, it's too fancy. She made a shell dress. She thought it was for me. My friend thought it was that I wanted a shell dress to dance in for Margaret. That's how she interpreted it. So I kept the shell dress, and I said, what kind of shell dress do you want? So she explained, and she said, this is how our people make shell dresses, and she started explaining. So I hired a lady from Crow who had the rights to do a shell dress. And I don't know why, it just never worked out. The lady disappeared. The number that I was supposed to contact her in 2 months. Anyway, it didn't work out. So I'm honoring her today. I always honor her when I speak because of all of the teachings that she gave me. And the same thing like what Peter was saying, that someday somebody's going to ask you some questions and you better be able to answer, because this is what I'm leaving with you. So I took a little bit of some of the teachings that she gave me. I mean, like, some of her stuff is really deep. So for the Sacred Bundle presentation, I'm going to be giving you this presentation. We used to travel together quite a bit, and we'd go to conferences and presentations, and I taught at the University of Montana. And at the University of Montana, she was my co-facilitator, my lecturer too, and the kids loved her, the students loved her. One of the things that we enjoyed talking about was Do I have the clicker or you have it? Click. Thank you. Wait. Okay. So one of the philosophical questions we talked about was that education was the problem. And then we also talked and talked and talked philosophically, and we came up with, well, then education is the solution. So I'm going to explain that, but it requires a long story to go with it. All right? I'm going to give it to you very briefly, but this was a really deep conversation. When we traveled, we talked about how the whole colonization process overtook Nitsitapio. We had compassion, we had kindness, we had all of those values that we lived with. And in that, when the settlers came, they were wanting to be our neighbors. So we moved over and we said, here, share some of the, the land. We didn't give it to them because we didn't have that concept in our mind. It wasn't there. Napiquags, their concept of coming to settle is mine. This is my land. I'm going to stake it. I'm going to get the money out of it. I'm going to make a living, and I'm going to use the resources and so on. We didn't have that concept. We shared. Everything was shared. So along the way, residential school, children, the whole family structure was fractured. Our children were taken to the residential school. You still hear stories about it today. It's still a deep wound. And she said, yes, we went to residential. She didn't go. I think she went for a few months, and then her dad and mom took her out. But she said, yes, they went to residential school and they learned English, they learned a different religion, they learned that they were not good enough. And then they were told at the age of 16, you're out of here, and then what? What was the next step? So they went back home to their families, and that whole process started. So the process of being colonized. And so as you are colonized, your mind shifts, your thinking shifts, your intelligence has a different way of looking at things. And so with that comes upheaval, and what we see today. And a lot of you had talked about it and asked questions about it. The elders have mentioned it as well. Anyway, so along the way, she said, Nitsitapio, we are very strong people. We survived. Creator brought us here and gave us this whole land, and the animals, the birds, the sea, the waters, everything. And everything you use is meaningful. It's not haphazard, and you don't explore it and mine it. So anyway, she was talking about all of these things, and then I would ask a question, and it just led on, and then she said, our ways are very strong. And she said, our men were very strategic. Our women were very strong. The men held our women in high regard. Our children were the center of the circle. They were in high regard. They were protected. Nobody touched them. The extended families had responsibility for all of those children. When you go to our ceremonies, you still see that. You still feel it. You get a sense of it, and you feel safe and secure. So those bundles that we have are so sacred. They don't belong to us, we take care of them. And so our children are like that too. We take care of them to the best of our ability. And we don't abuse them, we don't neglect them, we don't talk down to them. But this whole colonization process, the whole upheaval, brought chaos and mayhem to our communities. But that's not the end of the story, so hang in there. We'll talk about education as a solution. Oops. I'm clicking the wrong clicker. If I can do this simultaneously. All right. I'm getting old, so bear with me. My introduction to the presentation this afternoon is going to be two things. I want to get two children to sit up here, not right now, but I will call you. I want you to volunteer. I want this to be a willing volunteer because we're going to learn a lot, and I want to impart that to you so you could take it home with you and teach your children this. This is a teaching. This was given to me when Adun and I went down to the United States when I was teaching. We went to a youth treatment center, and it blew us away. So the kids gave us this. They transferred that little activity to us to take back with us. I'm going to be talking about definition of culture. We'll skim through that quickly, then we're going to go into storytelling and Napi. These are all activities that help with children. How accessing culture affects family and community members. And we're going to examine some holistic stages. And she used a very sacred model, so I will show that model to you in terms of looking at how we raised our children based on that kind of a concept. And it made sense to me because then you could look at how you could teach children that way, how we don't have to use Jean-Jacques Rousseau's method of education, which was like 300-400 years ago, and the chairs were all lined up and the desks, and then you sit there, you come into the classroom, you sit down, you be quiet, and you listen. And if you didn't listen, you got the strap, or you got whipped, or you got punished. So this is a gentle way of looking at teaching children. Then we're going to look at developing solutions, which everybody's looking for, and identifying individual and collective goals for raising children and looking after our sacred bundles. I just wanted to share, I know you guys like stories, so I will share a story. When we were talking about residential school, my Aunt Flora Shade told us a story when she first went to school. She marched into the school and she was gung-ho to learn, quote. And she said, I had no idea I couldn't speak English, just a little tiny bit, but not very much. And we sat down, and then the first thing they did was, she knew all the girls in her class, and the nuns told everybody to stand. Everybody stood up, and they had to pledge allegiance to the king. And you know how that goes. And so she said, and this was probably more like around Christmas time when she was picking up with her English. So she was really listening to the pledge of allegiance. And when it got to God Save Our Gracious King, she got that. Long live our noble king. send him Victoria, and her friend was Victoria over there. Send him Hannah. Hannah was sitting over there. And Gloria. Yeah, we're going to send him over to the king. He's going to have 3 wives. So that was her little grade 1 story. She went home at Christmas and said, we're singing about the king and we're going to send him Hannah, Gloria, and anyway, so the family got a kick out of that one. Another friend of mine in Navajo country, we went to school together in the States. And she was always telling silly little stories. So I'm going to give you one of her Navajo residential school stories. And she was saying, well, you know how it is like in residential school. Yeah, when you get there, they strip you of your clothes, your family clothes, and then they put you in their clothes. And we all looked the same. We all had the same haircuts. And she said, they all lined, the nun said, oh, okay, all you little children, line up. So the children lined up. You're gonna get, oh, she said, line up. And then they all lined up, and so she said, oh, good. Sister said we're gonna get bananas. Line up, you're all gonna get bananas. They all lined up. And then she said, I was just waiting for my banana. And here that she was handing out pajamas. So we do have some funny stories to tell, and we can tell these stories all night and share, but they are funny. But anyway, moving on, our stories have meaning. I mean, we don't just haphazardly tell stories. They all have meaning. And this is Margaret. I'm just going to introduce you because before I came, I prayed. Like she said, I won't leave you, just call me and I'll be there. And Adun, yo, can I get somebody to click for me? The left arrow. This is Adun in my vehicle, and we just arrived somewhere. Anyway, we traveled together, and she did transfer me some rights, and one of those rights is what I'm going to be sharing with you today, conceptualizing how we take care of sacred bundles and children. So let's click to the next one. We're going to be talking about culture. There's no right and wrong answers about culture. We value your opinions. There's no criticizing, no condemning, and no complaining about culture, because there's no right answer about it. Everybody has a different view of culture. Okay, we do, and we'll talk about ours. Next one. Culture is a complete. I don't know how many years we've been on Turtle Island since it was born. Many years ago. But we know that it has a complex whole. How we govern ourselves, how we behave, how we learn our songs, our stories, our everything that we do has meaning. All of the Pleiades in the sky that we learn about have meaning, and it's really interesting to hear about it because it makes sense and it just calms you down. And if you want good therapy, you've got to go and see an elder and